Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kirill Kalmasian. Hello for everyone watching us from North America or South America, from Africa, from Europe, and from Asian countries. Today, I'm joined by Pepe Escobar. In Arabic, we say غني عن التعريف, which means like he needs no introduction. But there is a story behind this. In actually, the first time I came to the work of Pepe Escobar was in 2012. When I first moved to Beirut, and through a mutual colleague, Shamin Narwani, she introduced me to his work and his writings about geopolitics. I was a kiddo. This was around 11 years ago. And I was impressed by his geopolitical analysis and his eloquent style in writing and verbal expressions. And I always like Pepe to start this conversation with my guests with a personal question. For the younger audience watching us today on this live streaming, what advices do you give to them so that they try to comprehend and master geopolitics and at the same time develop a unique style of writing skills and talking skills like the one that you have? Because I believe this is probably a gift or also a hard work for quite some time.
Wow. That's quite a question. Okay, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure and huge respect. You're from Aleppo, one of the cradles of civilization. From
Yes.
immense respect from somebody who was always a big history freak and a big civilization freak. Well, your question, it's a very interesting question because actually a lot of young people ask me this question over the years. Okay, if we had a roadmap, first of all, history and geography. Go very, very deep in history and geography. Languages. Learn at least 3 or 4, at least. And if you can, at least 5 or 6. Travel. That's much more complicated because this is expensive, costly, it takes time, etc. But start traveling as early as possible. Even if you start backpacking in Peru or, backpacking across Syria for that matter, start like that. It's not a matter of having a huge budget. But, then you can, you have the opportunity to perfect what you learn from reading, from history, from geography with on-the-ground experience. And this is how you start building in case you want to become a writer or in case you want to go professional later on, which seriously, it's a very, very tough path to all of you. And I always tell students, and nowadays, it's much, much more complicated than when I started. I started in let's say early 80s, essentially. In the late 70s, after university, I was still traveling. And it was much easier. You could jump from one job to the next. You had many opportunities. If you made your name, you had, in fact, even opportunities with mainstream media.
Yes.
Of becoming a correspondent, which is my case. I forced myself vis-a-vis a big newspaper, national newspaper, to become a foreign correspondent. They didn't want, they want me to stay there in the newsroom where I sold a lot of papers for them. But I said, no, I want to go around the world. So I forced myself out. And at least at the time you could do that. That was the mid 80s. So I became a full-time foreign correspondent, 1985, almost 40 years ago. But I had to force myself out. Fighting with the owners of the paper. And then it was the only way if you have a long-term vision of, I want to write about politics all over the world. That's a very, very, very tough thing to do. So you need a lot of time, you need a lot of travel, and you need to meet a lot of people and build your network. And then one day, of course, when you are mature, when you are maybe in your 40s or 50s, it pays off. Because, all that hard travel, all that hard study, all that hard reading, all that reading at 4 or 5 in the morning pays off. And then you start to have at least a glimpse of the complexity of the world around you. And of course, going to summits, interviewing politicians living in different countries, comparing cultures, comparing actually living clash of civilizations on the spot. And then you get the odd war. And in our case nowadays, you're going to get plenty of wars, intertwined wars, which is what we're living now. So what I can tell you guys, if you want to go for it, it's extremely hard, extremely tough. And the rewards that you have basically is, I would say, an inner experience. You feel that you are at home with yourself because you feel that you are doing the right thing.
Yes.
Especially, of course, if you understand how the world works, and you have, I would say, a definitive option to be on the right side of history.
Oh, that's really
So
important.
I painted you the optimistic scenario. Let's put it this way.
Guys, this is an amazing explanation. However, it's a really big headache. If you want to get involved in political affairs, in writing and journalistic affairs, don't think it's not about some people get into this field out of they want fame. This is not the purpose of you shouldn't go into this field to be famous. You should use your fame
to be wealthy. Forget it.
Yeah. If you want, I think if you get into this and you get the fame, you need to use the fame to influence the public opinion. This is the only time that you can use the fame. Otherwise, anything else is just negative, and you will be slandered and you will receive lots of backlashes, especially if you're on the right side of history, like Pepe said, because the money and the manufacturing consent, these manufacturers through manufacturing consent, are most of the time on the other side, the opposite side of, let's say, of the tooth. And you will be tired, and your brain sometimes feels like at night you just need to rest. And one of the issues that we are witnessing nowadays is this onslaught against the Gazans and against the Palestinians, and it's a very emotional thing for lots of people. And I'm trying to always detach myself from emotions, but it's very hard. I grew up. I was born.
You grew up in Syria. It's very hard for you.
I was born on during the first Intifada. Of course, I don't remember it, but we grew up on the stories of the first Intifada, and then the second Intifada. We watched all the brave kids facing the tanks. When I was a kid, we lived the Iraq War, we lived the Syrian War, the invasion of Lebanon, again Gaza. So many things that you cannot really detach from these emotions. But last week, the president of, only yesterday, a delegation of Arabic countries and Islamic countries headed to China. And they're headed by or led by the Saudis. I think the first question would be here: has China become the Mecca of peace and peaceful settlements of geopolitical crisis, especially after the diplomatic efforts to bring the Saudis and the Iranians to certain agreements, let's say on a minimum level, to de-escalate in the region and find ways of conflict resolution that were preceded like 40 years. In the past 40 years, they were on the opposite sides, right?
It's fascinating, Kevork, because let's see, China now is a ray of hope for the global South, global majority. What I learned from this delegation of foreign ministers is something extraordinary. We still don't have all the details, but you remember that a week ago in Riyadh there was this special Arab World Organization of Islamic Conference meeting on Palestine. They released a very, very bland final declaration, and many of us, we were in fact extremely disappointed.
Yes.
In fact, one of my columns last week, I was talking about the four cowards: Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. On second thoughts, then I started analyzing it deeper after the start of this mission. The first port of call is Beijing, very, very important. And the second is as important, Moscow with Lavrov. So on Monday, they meet with Wang Yi in Beijing. On Tuesday, they meet with Lavrov in Moscow. It is led by the Saudi Arabians, but Egypt plays a very, very important role as well. So from when I saw the composition of the delegation at first, I said, this is weird. There are no Iranians, no Turks, and no Qataris. Why? So digging deeper, I found out why. I hope so. The Egyptians coordinated the whole thing from the beginning. So there was an initial consultation between the Egyptians, the Turks, and the Iranians. So the Egyptians are more or less representing the Iranian and Turkish point of view. So they are more or less coordinating with the Saudis, the leadership of this foreign ministry delegation. And this is very, very important because it involves BRICS 11 nations.
Yes.
Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Iran, even if they are not represented by the foreign ministry delegation. And the fact that they chose as their first two capitals, Beijing and Moscow, this is the BRICS 11, definitive BRICS 11 connection. And they are doing this a month and 10 days roughly before the start of BRICS 11, January 1st, with the Russian presidency. So in terms of focusing on this mini ray of light, we can see that as a sort of embryo role for BRICS 11. They're going to be much more forceful on a global diplomatic level with the big shots, Russia and China, and with the new BRICS 11 members on the front line as well. So at the moment, considering we are in the middle of an abyss, and considering that what's happening in Gaza sucked everything that is happening around the world into this black hole, at least we have, I'll say, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Actually, this allegation, they say they're going to discuss the escalation in the Gaza Strip or ceasefire, but there is also another point, and that is the Arab League or the Arab Peace Initiative.
Exactly.
We remember in 2002 this was adopted, a peace plan with Israel, which was back then ridiculed by the United States and Israel, and they put it on the shelf. I mean, 11 years later, the United States and American and European officials and journalists and media outlets are all of a sudden talking about like the only way out of this conflict is a two-state solution, and they're criticizing what they say the radical Jewish settlers in the West Bank. Like there is a change of tone, right? A few weeks after this Gaza onslaught, and now they're all speaking about the two-state solution. Like people are asking me what has changed since then. And second of all, they're asking me, are the United States and the European Union trying to save the Israelis from themselves by pushing this two-state solution, because the amount of onslaught and the carnage the Israelis inflicted upon the Palestinians is unbearable for the international public?
Well, we can see it partially as an effort to try to save this uber extreme government in Tel Aviv at the moment, which in fact they managed to do something that we thought was not possible in the so-called 21st progressive century of our values from the West predominating everywhere else. They managed to normalize a genocide 24/7 on everyone's smartphone all over the planet. This is something that none of us could ever imagine it will happen. At the same time, what they are doing engendered a global backlash, especially across the global majority, the global South, but in very serious pockets and influential pockets here in the global North. We see through these enormous demonstrations everywhere: Vancouver, New York City, Chicago, London, Paris, etc. So the problem is, the big problem in terms of this extremely destructive Zionist government in Tel Aviv, and what they consider a window of opportunity, which came not from heaven, but from the so-called New Pearl Harbor, as they defined on day one. So they gave away the game on day one as a final solution, excuse me if I am so blunt, of the Palestinian problem. And I'm being blunt twice. You all know what that means.
Yes.
This for them is the final solution. And they have this window of opportunity. And that explains why in this remix of Tacitus, very perverse. Tacitus wrote that they create a wasteland and call it peace. Now they create a wasteland in northern Gaza and they call it our land.
Yes.
Because what they want is to basically extinguish Palestine. So it starts with North Gaza and it's already moving to South Gaza. Because the people that they forced to cross from North Gaza to South Gaza, they will keep forcing them to actually leave Gaza for good and provoke this exodus to Egypt. We don't know what's going to happen next, but this is what they want. This is their plan. This is the final solution plan. The thing is, they obviously, because they are not strategic thinkers. I'm talking about the Netanyahu cabinet, for instance. These are a bunch of genocidal fanatics. These people don't think strategically. They think in terms of cheap, trashy, biblical scatology, which is what they're doing at the moment, right? But we have to take them seriously because they are extremely dangerous. Now, maybe some of them, and also there is internal pressure in Israel. Israel is not fully behind. Polls say that 70% of the Israeli population more or less agrees with what's going on in Gaza. I don't think so. I think this is very Israel is very, very divided because they are seeing the consequences and they are seeing the negative consequences to the state of Israel itself globally. They just need to see public opinion around the world, how they are reacting to a genocide live, right?
Pepe, the
yes,
public
go
opinion
ahead.
is the public opinion is shifting very radically, in my
Very
opinion.
radically, yes.
And I think on X, or previously called Twitter, because we have relatively different rules there, and people are still able to post the atrocities from the Gaza Strip. Even the people who were in the middle, it hurts them in the stomach to see all this footage coming from the Gaza Strip. I'm not a military expert, but I followed, for example, the Syrian war, and I followed the Ukrainian war. If we see the Ukraine war, like when the Russian offensive started and they occupied certain areas, captured it, they built fortifications and they mined the areas, the main roads, so when the Ukrainian counteroffensive started, I said they need two things: one, artillery power, and then air power, air force. And they didn't have both. They didn't have the superiority of these two types of weaponry. So they lost the counteroffensive. It was very clear. But in the case of Gaza, Hamas and Jihad, they don't have these fortifications and all these trenches like in Ukraine. They are fighting a guerrilla warfare. They have their bunkers. They have their tunnels. Therefore, the moment you see the Israeli side is carpet bombing northern Gaza and they are turning everything into rubble, this indicates that they were not interested in fighting Hamas and Jihad at the first few days when they were just bombing everywhere. They were just interested in pushing the people out of these areas because this doesn't defeat the they didn't try to minimize the humanitarian catastrophe, and they didn't try to hit, let's say, Hamas or Jihad because they don't have headquarters there. The only way to occupy or eliminate Hamas and Jihad is ground offensive. And all this bombardment that happened, it disagrees with your analysis that their goal was the final solution for the Palestinian problem, push them to the south, and from the south to Egypt. And they were speaking about this tent cities, right?
Tent cities, yes.
Yes, Egypt was very clear about this. We can criticize Egypt and Saudi Arabia and their, let's say, loose diplomacy sometimes, but Egypt said this is an act of war. And I think they take this into consideration, like 2 million Palestinians to Sinai, because you know what's going to happen if 2 million Palestinians go to the Sinai, and if few of them organize an armed rebellion and they want to go back to the Gaza Strip, this time to their homes, what is going to happen? Israel will say, now I need a buffer zone on Egyptian territory.
On Egyptian territory, exactly.
It's like this doesn't take a genius to understand what Israel is planning for Egypt, not only for the Palestinians. And I'm happy that the Egyptians were firm about this, even through diplomatic channels or through mediators, because Israel's goal, like they occupied Sinai in 1967. And what makes people think that they will not try to occupy it again this time?
There's no question about that.
There's no question about that.
And of course, the IDF is ill-equipped to fight a guerrilla war on Gaza territory. They simply cannot do it because they don't know how to do it. And what they're doing now is, from a military point of view, is absolutely stupid. They have unprotected tanks in alleyways, and you have Hamas fighters with RPGs and in sandals. They go plant explosives in the tanks and they retreat. This is something completely nuts. So there is no infantry, there's no protection of the tanks, absolutely nothing. So they are basically incompetent to fight a ground war in Gaza. And this proves us once again that the plan is not a war in Gaza. The plan is to expel Palestinians. And this is going on very, very fast. And it's already moving to South Gaza as well. And if any one of us can see that, obviously the people who are running the show behind, they can also see that. And obviously there is pressure over the famous window of opportunity. Look, you have to wrap this up as soon as possible. And this is the message that the Americans are sending to Tel Aviv. And obviously to hear this from the protectors themselves, live, in fact, for them is catastrophic. This means that they have another 2 or 3 weeks to prove tangible results. There won't be any, especially because the axis of resistance has not even started yet. Hezbollah, Nasrallah's strategy with Hezbollah, I would say, is absolutely brilliant. He read a little bit of General Giap in Vietnam, certainly. And he learned from some Iraqi commanders who also learned from the Vietnamese. It's a guerrilla war, like the guerrilla that was in Iraq, the Sunni guerrilla in Iraq during the 2000s. I remember I was there. I followed a little bit of the triangle of death at the time, including Fallujah. And of course, we stalled them. It's death by 1,000 cuts, no frontal attacks, and it's going to be guerrilla nonstop. The Israeli army simply cannot fight a guerrilla war in Gaza, period. So they are stuck already, and they don't have a plan B, because the plan A from the beginning was we bomb everything to rubble, which is exactly what they're doing, and there's nothing else, right? From an American point of view, of course, they know that if this might, very important, extrapolate to have Hezbollah getting in big time, missile style, and the rest of the axis of resistance, especially in Iraq, bombing American installations and bases in Iraq in style, and with Iranian background, this thing could derail completely for Israel, and the Americans will be forced to get in, which is something that they can't. First of all, they don't have troops, they don't have ammo, they don't have weapons, and they know they will be in a major quagmire.
Actually, that's very good point, because in my opinion, even if Netanyahu wants to escalate, the Americans, it's in their interest to de-escalate now, because they don't have the means and the manpower in the region. Yeah, they don't. Like in Ukraine, they started sending the cluster bombs because they couldn't produce enough ammunition for the Ukrainian army. Now, while the Arabic and Islamic foreign ministers are in Beijing, and because we're speaking about Hezbollah, and these Israeli and American disagreements are coming to the surface, Hezbollah escalated in the past 48 hours exponentially in southern Lebanon, and bombed today, for example, with half a ton missile, a military barrack in northern Israel. So the question here would be, is Hezbollah increasing pressure on Israel to accept any agreement that may come from Beijing, or are they saying we are not interested in any agreement that may come from Beijing in this regard?
I think it's a mix of both. They are increasing the pressure. That's by 1,000 cuts, and some cuts go deeper than others, which is this cut today. They completely destroy, they totally destroy an Israeli military base on the border with Lebanon.
Yes.
Okay, this is huge. It's enormous. At the same time, they are refraining from getting much deeper, which they could at any time. And this is something that Nasrallah, in his inimitable way, in his 2 speeches, he left, a margin of maneuver in the air. So basically, okay, we're watching everything. and we can fine-tune this the way we want it, anytime we want it. This was the basic message, right? So the few, I would say, the few brains over the few brains over room temperature, IQs over room temperature in the Pentagon, they can see that. They can see, because they gamed that before, and all the gaming is absolutely horrible for the Israeli side. They know that they cannot get into another front now. They are not prepared for it. They are looking at the mutinies even inside the deep state. It's not only in the State Department. There are different mutinies in the CIA as well, in the National Security Council. The fact that the guys who are theoretically organizing policy are extremely mediocre and, of course, totally out of their depth. I'm talking about Sullivan, Blinken, and company, right? These are not the guys who run policy. These are guys who implement policy decided above. They are just mere messengers, and they are mediocre messengers on top of it. And, of course, when they look at the crash test dummy impersonating a president of the United States, and when what we saw last week in San Francisco was absolutely appalling, to say the least, right? So there is no leadership, which means there is no strategic thinking, which means there are only tactical maneuvers on the fly. Okay, what are we going to do this week? And that's it, right? At the same time, the hegemon, they enjoyed a few tactical victories, because don't forget, all these forever wars are intertwined. And they are intertwined with the hybrid wars as well. This weekend, we had a major tactical victory with the election of an anarcho crazy in Argentina, which from an American point of view is beyond sublime. They managed not only to destroy Argentina from the inside with the Phipps columnist, but they destroyed the relationship between Argentina and Brazil, and they installed a Trojan horse inside BRICS, assuming Russia, China, and the other BRICS are going to look at Argentina. Do we want these people here? No, we don't. So the invitation to join BRICS will be disinvitated, you know. And Argentina will probably say, and Milei is probably going to say, no, I'm not going to join. And everybody's going to say, excellent, we don't want you anyway, right? And of course, on the other side is the incoming cosmic humiliation of NATO in Ukraine.
Yes.
Which is something that is happening as we speak by the minute. And after what happens in Avdiivka, which is probably going to be the game changer, it could last months. It's very possible. And the best Russian military analysts are saying, look, this is not going to be in the next few weeks. This is going to last months. But eventually we will prevail. So even if it lasts months, it's inevitable. So this means that by mid-2024, we're going to have the cosmic humiliation of NATO happening in front of us a few months before the American elections. So when the Democrats look at all that, they see, look, we have absolutely no way out, whatever happens. And we don't need a new war in West Asia, even though from the beginning, one of their strategic objectives was to set fire in West Asia, which they did. Because obviously they gave the go-ahead for Israel to do anything they wanted. And they keep giving it the go-ahead via crash test dummy himself, via Lloyd Austin, via Blinken, you name it, via Sullivan, via everybody. Wow. So now I can understand from afar. Well, I spent time in Washington, so I'm familiar with the players and with their mediocrity as well. There's simply no way out, whatever they do, which mirrors the situation of the Netanyahu cabinet in Israel. All options are absolutely lousy. So what's going to happen next?
Guys, by the way,
yes, go ahead.
But guys, by the way, before we continue the discussion, just wanted to let you know that this is where Pepe is publishing nowadays on the Cradle, and those are his articles. I already put the link on to his articles in the description below, and also his X account or Twitter account in the description below. You can go and read his articles that he's publishing as a column on the Cradle. I think the Cradle is doing a really amazing job in the terms of the reporting and analysis on different geopolitical topics that you may also consider it as a starting point to read and enlighten yourself if you're starting into geopolitics.
Yes,
as well.
I strongly recommend to everyone. I'm sure many of you know I've been in this business for a long time. So the Cradle, from the beginning, I was deeply implicated. Charmin is an extraordinary woman and a professional woman. So I supported her from the beginning. It reminds me in my old days at Asia Times in Hong Kong, where a few of us managed to put Asia, a very small website in Hong Kong, on a global internet map, which is something that is happening with the Cradle right now. The Cradle now is mentioned in corridors of power in Washington, in all across West Asia, in Southeast Asia, in many places in Europe as well. So it feels great to have an independent outlet with I would say a minimal budget and minimal infrastructure, managing in maybe a little over 2 years, less than 2 years, to become
less than 2
influential, less than 2 years to become influential and respected everywhere. So so this proves to you, all of you who want to become journalists and analysts one day, it's possible. And the Cradle is probably the exception that one of the few exceptions that prove that yes, it's still possible to do it.
Guys, because there is always a hunger and thirst for credible, objective, and comprehensive analysis. People are sick and tired of turning on their TVs, and the so-called talking head, the journalist, is telling them what to think about what to think. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to tell you what to think about the Gaza Strip. It's like it's crazy nowadays. When I open the TV, I feel my brain is humiliated. I'm insulted.
You're right.
They're treating me like I'm a stupid person that I cannot do my own homework, and it's so obvious the terminologies they use, the injection of the emotions when they want to hype the people and when they want them to not feel anything about any case or not to report about anything. Guys, they're telling things about the demos here, about the pro-Palestinian demos, pro-peace demos, things in the German media you cannot even imagine. Like in German, they are saying, for example, that Israel is bombing and Germany is financing. For example, in the media, they said that the demonstrators are calling for bombing Israel. Like, it's completely twisting of the facts. Like,
yes.
Yeah, I was there. I saw the people. Everybody was peaceful. Nobody harmed anyone in these demonstrations. And they were very, I would say, multicultural. This is the important thing about the Palestinian movement. They're from the Arabic countries, Islamic countries, European countries, American countries, Jewish people. Everyone is there. Like, they represent the different sectors of the society, and everybody is there asking for the minimum, and that is a dignity for the Palestinians, and stop killing them. I do not understand how is that this has become so controversial. Like yesterday, the correspondent of the Daily Wire in Rome, she threatened me on Twitter with investigation, and she tagged the German Secret Service and the German Migration Office on Twitter under her tweet, telling them that they have to consider me because what am I doing in Germany? That why am I not in Syria? Like she's calling for my deportation, and then she starts asking me, "What is your connection to Hamas, Kivok? What is your connection to Hezbollah? So tell us."
This is crazy. This is cancel culture in public, hardcore cancel culture in public.
Yeah, and all I did yesterday, because yesterday Israel killed 2 Palestinian journalists in the Gaza Strip. So the pro-Israeli journalists, they posted a video two journalists embedded with militants firing missiles, and they say, look, they were embedded with militants, so they got killed. And I just checked the video. It's from Syria. They're speaking Syrian dialect. They're from Idlib. They're from Al-Jabhat al-Nusra or HTS militants. And they're saying we're bombing Latakia. Like, you can hear them speaking Arabic. So I told her, please remove this video. You're justifying the murder of two Palestinian journalists, and those are from Syria, not from Palestine.
Exactly.
And this is where it led to. She's tagging the Secret Service of of Germany, telling them that I'm spreading misinformation on behalf of Hamas. And nowadays this is very, very, very sensitive issue. And the authorities are moving against people, against journalists, if they see them as a pro-Hamas or pro Hezbollah. So this is beyond cancel culture. It reminds me of when the unofficial informants, they used to tell the police to their Jewish neighbors to send them to the gas chambers.
Exactly.
It's like, where are we living? And these people were the so-called conservatives in the past few years. They were saying we're against cancel culture of the left, and they were pushing against this cancel culture. And all of a sudden, they became the cancel culture now when it came to the Palestinian issue. It's crazy.
It's true. And essentially, the directives come from the European Commission, in fact. We all know that the European Commission does not represent European citizens. They represent hidden interests, most of them American, some Atlanticist, oligarchical, all of them, big corporations, big pharma. We all know that. And most European citizens across Europe, especially across Western Europe, not so much in Eastern Europe, they know that as well. The problem is these directives go, not only they go to the main capitals, but they go to all the oligarch-controlled media in all these nations. So the same press release that you read in the Die Zeit in Germany, Le Monde in France, El País in Spain, La Stampa in Italy, it's the same narrative. And this narrative comes from Washington, Brussels. It sometimes it even bypasses the capitals, although all of the governments in these capitals, Scholz, Macron, Meloni, etc., they agree with that, of course. So this is a problem, because this is an enormous concentration of information, of misinformation and control and narrative control. So it's up to all of us independents in our networks around the global majority, the global south, or in pockets here in NATO stand, to at least, even if we don't manage to break the narrative, to ridicule them, which for them is much more painful. When we ridicule them and show how petty and how imbecile that they are, it stings them even more. So, this is one of our weapons, in fact.
Yeah. Pepe, if we go back last week, the presidents of China and the United States met and held long discussions. I don't know if Xi Jinping spoke to Biden. I'm not sure.
Of course they did. By the way, Kevork, there is a video surfaced I think since yesterday night, in the middle of the APEC summit. Biden gets up from his chair.
Yeah.
And he goes to Xi Jinping like that. Xi Jinping gets up from his chair. He's puzzled, because the translator was not there. Wang Yi approaches, and Wang Yi translates to Xi what Biden is mumbling. The video is fantastic. The video is as good as Biden in the beginning of his introductory remarks, where Tony Blinken is looking at him, absolutely terrified,
embarrassing,
and of course at the end, at the presser, when he says that exactly, that's the video. Brilliant. This video tells the whole story. We don't need anything else. And of course, at the end, when he's that famous question, do you still consider Xi Jinping to be a dictator? And he said yes. And obviously, with one in 10 seconds, he destroys everything that they discussed in the meeting. Although the most important thing in the meeting, in the APEC meeting as a whole, was not Joe Biden, was the business dinner at the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco, where every corporate honcho that matters in the U.S.,
the real owners,
paid between 2,000 and 40,000 bucks a pop to be on the line, to to greet Xi, maybe talk to him 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Everybody was there. So this is what matters, because in this business dinner, Xi Jinping sold, look, we're China, biggest trade commercial partner in the world. Come here, invest in our economy. You're more than welcome. And everybody got the message.
Yeah.
So this is what really mattered at the APEC summit, not obviously the clown show.
You already answered my question before even asking your question. You got it. But
yeah.
There's so much happening, like these Chinese and let's say American discussions, what's happening in the Middle East. But I think there is one person who is having a good time nowadays. I don't know if you agree with me, and Putin is having his best month since Russia invaded Ukraine.
There's no question about that. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
even the Rupert Murdoch, the Times admits it, right?
Yeah. Do you see any hope for let's say negotiating settlements with the presence of Zelensky, or they're going to push him under the bus soon?
No. He the process of throwing him under the bus already started, and obviously it always starts in the media. Time Magazine, Washington Post, New York Times. So this is already started. The problem is, okay, who's next? The deep state wants Zaluzhny. The problem is the big rats in Kiev are already fighting among themselves, and this is essentially big rat Zelensky against big rat Zaluzhny. We don't know the outcome yet. Anything can happen, but I'm sure the sweaty sweatshirt already sees the writing on the wall. He's not going to last very, very long. For the moment, the Americans are totally concentrated on West Asia. So obviously, Ukraine is a secondary thought, but there's got to be some resolution, I would say, by February, March next year, because by then we can have a lot of movement on the front lines. Especially Avdiivka. If they see that the fall of Avdiivka is inevitable, which is the beginning of the end, they have to do something about it. And of course, the fact that nothing that is introduced militarily or troops or whatever is going to change the outcome on the battlefield, which is something that Zaluzhny himself admitted in that famous interview that he gave to The Economist.
Yes.
So everybody knows that. So now it's a question of time. Okay, how long this tragic comedy is going to last? Another 3 months, another 5 months, another 6 months until summer? And is this guy going to stay in power? Obviously not. But we need another one. Which one? We still don't know. So that's where we are at the moment.
I think it's a big burden.
Yeah, it is.
A big burden.
It is a Kevork, and it's always fascinating to see that comprador elites and hegemon vassals, they never learn the story. They never learn how it works with the hegemon. If you fulfill your task to the limit and even more, they preserve you and you are rewarded. If you don't deliver, they throw you under the bus at the first opportunity. That's exactly what's happening now.
Pepe, I think Ukraine is a burden because they have to finance Ukraine's army, Ukraine's institutions, and
everything. The government.
They have to pay for the salaries and everything. In contrast, in Syria, and this is my last question to you. In contrast, in Syria, it's not a burden because they are stealing the oil, they're financing their presence there, and the militias on the eastern shore of the Euphrates. And I think the situation is a stalemate nowadays in Syria in a way that the Americans aren't sending any indications and signals to withdraw. And just last week, there was a report or an interview with the former head of the Lebanese security apparatus, Abbas Ibrahim, And he mentioned that during the era of Trump, Trump sent his representative to Syria, and he went with them to Syria, and they met with the heads of the security apparatuses in Damascus, and they were talking about withdrawal from Syria. They were talking about the lifting of some of the sanctions, and also the fate of Tice, this former Marine officer, American officer, who disappeared in Syria, and we don't know what happened to him. And what happened is Abbas Ibrahim traveled to Washington, D.C. to continue the negotiations with the American side. While he was in Washington and speaking with the Americans, Trump went on TV and he said he's going to assassinate Assad. And the Syrians stopped the negotiations with the American side. So it was advanced back then, the negotiations. Now there is no talk between the Americans and the Syrian side. There is nothing. There is nothing. So what is the fate of the Syrian situation? Everything is now put on a shelf. Ukraine war, Palestine war, and the Syrians in Syria, you know, it's a devastating situation. Economy is destroyed. They cannot finance the people's salaries. They're printing money, which is inflation. They don't have oil. They don't have electricity. How can the Syrians kick the American forces out? Whether diplomatically or militarily, should they wait for a compromise to happen in Ukraine? Is it a package, or it's a separate issue in your opinion?
It's a separate issue because from an American point of view, the current status quo is perfect. Syria is broken, is divided. 1/3 is occupied. They steal the oil. They have these deals with this gangster outfits. Kurdish with some Arabs infiltrated in the northeast. They know that the Syrian Arab army by itself cannot dislodge them. So this would need a concerted effort by the axis of resistance with major Iranian influence behind and Iranian military help behind. We know this is not going to happen anytime soon. It might happen later. It might happen, let's say, if we have some sort of resolution in Palestine. So we're talking about at least 1 year from now, a year and a half from now. So from the American point of view, it's these kinds of frozen conflicts for them are perfect. They don't have to do anything apart. Keep what, 1,000? They have 1,000 fighters in Syria at the moment. The Americans not more than that, but you know, it's enough to steal the oil.
Unfortunately,
it's absolutely horrible when you look at it, but it's for them it's enough. So Syria by itself, Syrian Arab army by itself, Damascus by itself, no, they need help, and the help needs to come from. You have to come from Iraq. You have to come from Hezbollah. You have to come from Iran. And considering what's already happening in West Asia, it's not going to happen now. So Syria will still have to wait, which is extremely tragic.
Yes,
very. It's extremely tragic. We cannot even imagine how tragic it is for the Syrian population. So I'm sorry I cannot give you an answer that is at least satisfactory.
No, that is the truth. What you're saying is the truth, and I agree with you. And I just because at the beginning of our conversation, you said you come from Aleppo. You guys have to study history, and in order to understand also history and geography, so that you comprehend geopolitics. And since I come from Aleppo and from Syria, and I know the worth of this the Syrian geography and the civilizations that it represents,
cradle of civilization.
Yeah, that's why I put lots of effort. People ask me why you're doing this. Like, you put yourself in lots of troubles. You lose job opportunities. You lose scholarships because you say, yeah, I know.
Well, you have to do it. I understand why you do it. Because you have to do it.
I have to do it, and I will do it, and I will continue doing it. And I think, I believe that Syria will be liberated. I truly believe it. It's not a fantasy.
It's going to take time.
It's going to take time. And
can I ask you something, Kevork?
Yes.
How the restoration, reconstruction of Aleppo, Palmyra, what stage are we at the moment? It's still incipient. It's in the beginning. They progress. Can you see actual progress in front of you?
they started reconstructing the old souks in Aleppo.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you need also the support of the UN. The UNESCO has to come to check the, let's say, the antiques. They have to check the ancient places. Syria is in a state of, let's say, they are turning around an empty circle. And because of the war, and you will always have parallel economies because of the war. So the corruption which was before the war, it has skyrocketed because of the war, and the government needed certain elements in the society to stabilize the finances there. But these people who were financing, now they have become warlords, right? I'm criticizing the Syrian government, but they needed people to be financially supportive to the government effort. So they formed the National Defense Forces. They fought alongside the government. Now the government cannot all of a sudden start fighting against these corrupted people, and we're still in a state of war. So it's a mixture of, let's say, government corruption and parallel economies that increased in the pound in the country, and at the same time strangling the economy by outside forces through the sanctions. So it's a combination of factors that I would argue the reconstruction is very slow, and the people are really fed up. And I think the support for the government is diminishing because of this, because the people said, we stood with the government when there was an existential threat against us, and we knew that the government is protecting us by the Syrian army. But now we need milk for our child, I need bread, and the government has to divide. Like, for example, you as a family of 4, you can have only, for example, how many breads per week and how much milk you can buy, because there's a scarcity. The government, if they let everyone buy everything, then the rich will come and buy everything, and the poor will not be able to buy something, right?
Exactly.
So they have to balance it. But this situation is leading into agony, anger, and the people are just start to talk a lot about this situation, and they are rightfully so, I would say. And this is what the Americans are betting on: the public anger against Assad, so that they rise and remove him. But the Americans have to understand that the people are already tired of 12 years, and rising and organizing some sort of uprising that they're hoping for. People are so tired for that, and they're not even ready to go and in face the government whether peaceful or in an armed way. Therefore, this is just slowly killing the people, and at the same time, the people are becoming impoverished, 90% below poverty line. So it's a
90%.
Yeah, according to the UN, it's 90% of the people are below poverty line, and there are. I spoke to the UN Special Rapporteur and the effects of the unilateral coercive measures against Syria, and she said there were diseases in Syria that disappeared completely in the past decades, and now we can see the rise and the emergence of these diseases because the vaccines. And I'm not talking about the COVID vaccine now. Well-established vaccines, they need refrigerators, they need electricity, and the government can only supply 12 hours of electricity to the hospital. So when I speak about these cases...
Even in the big cities, even in Aleppo and Damascus.
This is criminal. What the Americans are doing to Syria is criminal. They're destroying people. They're not destroying the government. The government, if you go to Damascus, they're sitting in their offices with their air conditioning, and they're fine. They can find fuel. They can find everything. So, and betting on the people to rise. This is just my message, because they watch these videos and stuff. They're not going to rise against the government and remove the government, well knowing that the alternative are these radical elements in Idlib or in the north.
The alternative is Jabhat al-Nusra. It's completely absurd. Yeah.
So
is there any tangible foreign investment? Example, Iran or Russia? No.
Iranians invested in the energy sector and in the telecommunications center in Aleppo. The thing is, these investments need time for the people to see tangible results on the ground. And because Syria's economy was based, Hafez al-Assad, he's a mastermind. He divided the Syrian economy, or he connected the Syrian economy in a way that Raqqa cannot be prosperous unless Deir ez-Zor is prosperous. Deir ez-Zor cannot be prosperous unless Damascus is prosperous. Everything is connected to each other. If the grain is coming from here, then the factory is in Raqqa, and then the sell and distribution is in Aleppo. He connected everything to each other, so all the Syrians can benefit from the Syrian economy. The Americans know this. Therefore, they cut the joints of the Syrian economy by occupying one part and disconnecting the other parts from each other. Like my father, he had a business in Aleppo, and we used to sell spare parts for big trucks. And these trucks, they bring grains, for example, from Deir ez-Zor and from Hasakeh. But these areas are occupied now. So no trucks are coming to Aleppo, which means Aleppo industrial city is non-functional, basically. Everything is connected with each other. And I think the it's just I would cry if I speak with my parents or with someone in Syria, and they're telling me what's happening and how they secure some fuel for heating. It's like those are things we don't think about it, right? In the places that we live in. But those are all a result of the American-led war against Syria. Before the war, Pepe, the liter of mazot, we say, the fuel that we need for heating, the liter was 7 lira, 7 Syrian lira, which is 5 cents or something. The prices are 1,000 times more expensive now, 1,000 times. And the salaries are the same, $30, $40, $50 per month. Before the war, the average salaries were $600 to $1,000.
I remember. Yes, 600, 500.
My father, if he made 1,500, for example, maximum per month, we could have lived like kings in four family members in Syria. Now it's impossible, unfortunately. Yeah. So we don't want you guys to be depressed, but I believe that.
No, but thank you for the lesson. This was wow.
Yeah.
A lesson of realism, in fact.
Yeah. I believe that every inch of Syria will be liberated. As Pepe said, it will take time. But during this time, we shouldn't stop talking about Syria. Yes. We shouldn't stop talking about Palestine. Every oppressed people, we have to shed light on their suffering, and we have to shape the public opinion. And this is the reason why I do what I do on Syrian analysis. And I hosted today Pepe Escobar, a brilliant person and a brilliant analyst. Thank you so much, Pepe, really, for your time and for dedicating all this time. I just want to thank very quickly Black Tie for his generous support, and I would like to thank Zain for his generous support. Guys, if you want to support my independent work, you can see the link here is on the screen, www.patreon.com/Syriana analysis, and I will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.